At 0247 ICT on the 31st of January 1968, a firecracker to gunshot snap jolts Saigon awake, and 19 Viet Cong sappers blow a hole through the wall of the United States Embassy. Within 4 hours, all 19 lie dead on the manicured lawn, yet their photographs circle the globe. Across South Vietnam, 84,000 attackers surge into 36 of 44 provincial capitals and more than 100 district towns, banking on a general uprising that will shatter the Saigon government. The world watches cities burn and assumes the war just turned. What no camera captures is the kill rate inside those cities or the silence that follows when local cadres stop reporting. Tet flips the war, but not the way anyone predicts. The revolution dies in the streets it tries to claim. Popular memory holds that Tet broke American will and proved the Viet Cong could strike anywhere, anytime. News anchors declare stalemate, protest signs multiply. President Lyndon Johnson announces he will not seek re-election 10 weeks later. The narrative becomes canonical. A peasant army humiliates a superpower. Textbooks freeze the story there, with sappers inside embassy walls and Walter Cronkite's grim verdict on the 27th of February, 1968. Missing from that frame are the body counts, the silence on party radio nets, and the flood of PAVN regulars sent south to plug gaps the Viet Cong can no longer fill. The myth survives because cameras catch the explosion, not the collapse that follows. Shock and defeat look identical in a photograph. The Tet Offensive rests on a three-part theory. Simultaneous urban attacks will overwhelm thin Allied garrisons, spark mass defections among Army of the Republic of Vietnam troops, and trigger a popular uprising that topples the Saigon regime. The Communist Party's Central Office for South Vietnam issues attack orders in late 1967, designating 36 provincial capitals, 100 district towns, and dozens of military installations as primary targets. Cadre infiltrates cities weeks in advance, caching weapons in safe houses, mapping routes, and synchronizing timings to the Lunar New Year truce when Allied forces stand at half strength. On paper, the plan exploits surprise, numbers, and the assumption that South Vietnamese civilians will join the fight once they see the liberation flag. Central Office for South Vietnam calculates that if even 20% of urban populations rise, government control will evaporate. The mechanism depends on secrecy, speed, and popular momentum, three variables that collapse within 48 hours. The Viet Cong excel at guerrilla operations. Ambush, withdraw, blend into hamlets, tax at night, vanish at dawn. Their entire structure, local force companies, provincial battalions, village-level political cadre, optimizes for dispersion, not concentration. Urban assault inverts that. Advantage: sappers who survive by anonymity must now hold fixed positions, fire from rooftops, and defend perimeters against reinforcements they cannot outrun. Allied response cycles compress from days to hours. ARVN commanders recall leave, activate reserve battalions, and feed regional force and popular force militias into block-by-block clearance. United States and ARVN artillery and airstrikes, restricted in open country by rules of engagement, now pour ordnance into city blocks where the Viet Cong cannot maneuver. The attackers trade invisibility for firepower they do not possess. Worse, the anticipated uprising never materializes. South Vietnamese civilians flee the fighting, shelter in place, or in some cases guide ARVN troops to VSI positions. Political officers wait for crowds that never form. Supply caches run dry. Radio contact with rural networks falters as ARVN interdiction tightens. By the 3rd of February, 1968, every major city except Hue has been retaken, and intelligence summaries from Military Assistance Command, Vietnam, begin noting a new pattern. Veteran VC cadre die faster than PAVN replacements can arrive. Province-level tax collectors, informants, and political commissars, the sinew of the insurgency, burn down in daylight. The mechanism that was supposed to ignite revolution instead ignites the cadre who carried it. Tet transforms the Viet Cong from an invisible network into a visible target. Allied forces do what they do best: find, fix, and destroy concentrated formations. Shock wins the headlines. Attrition decides the outcome. At 0247 ICT on the 31st of January 1968, a firecracker to gunshot snap echoes through Saigon's diplomatic quarter as 19 Viet Cong sappers from the elite C-10 battalion blast through the outer wall of the United States Embassy. The team carries satchel charges, AK-47 rifles, and orders to seize the 6-story chancery and hold it until relieving forces arrive. 2 United States military police guards, Specialist 4, Seikan, Charles Daniel, and Private First Class William Sebest engage immediately from the compound entrance. Both die within minutes. The firefight lasts 6 hours. By 0915 ICT, all 19 sappers lie dead. 17 inside the compound, 2 on the street, killed by Marine security guards, MPs, and airborne reaction teams that rappel onto the chancery roof. No attacker breaches the embassy building itself. The mission fails operationally. Yet within hours, photographs of bodies sprawled on embassy lawns saturate evening news broadcasts in the United States, and the image crystallizes a single perception: nowhere is safe. Across Saigon, the pattern repeats at larger scale. VC sappers assault Tan Son Nhut Air Base, the presidential palace, and the national radio station, hoping to broadcast a victory message that never airs. At Tan Son Nhut, the 267th Main Force Battalion penetrates the perimeter fence at 0315 ICT, but ARVN and United States Air Force Security Police pin the attackers in open ground. By afternoon, 115 VC lie dead and the runway reopens. At the radio station, a 12-man commando team storms the building, kills guards, and prepares a tape, only to discover the transmitter was moved weeks earlier. ARVN Rangers retake the station by dawn. The coordination is impressive. The execution is lethal. The outcome is uniform failure. Every high-value target in Saigon returns to Allied control within 24 hours. Yet the tactical defeats produce a strategic photograph: American embassy under attack. Intelligence logs from MACV note something cameras do not capture. The sappers die to the last man. No retreat, no resupply, no second wave. The Viet Cong trade their most experienced urban cadre for a 6-hour firefight that changes nothing on the ground, but everything in public perception. General William Cy Westmoreland, commander of United States Military Assistance Command Vietnam, states on the 1st of February 1968 that the enemy has been defeated in every major action. The statement is factually correct and politically disastrous. By the 2nd of February 1968, ARVN and United States forces have reclaimed Saigon, but the television footage has already defined the offensive. What the cameras miss is the toll. Over 1,200 VC killed in the city, hundreds captured, entire sapper companies annihilated. MACV intelligence summaries begin tracking a new metric: cadre losses, and the numbers climb faster than replacements can move south. In Long An Province, southwest of Saigon, the VC Provincial Committee loses 9 of 13 district-level political offices in the first week. Surviving cadre report that militia recruitment stops and tax collection collapses. The same pattern repeats across the Mekong Delta. Mai Tho, Ben Tre, Can Tho. District headquarters fall, then return to government control within 48 to 72 hours. The VC battalions that seize them die in place or scatter into countryside where ARVN sweep operations wait. One Delta province chief later estimates that 30 to 50% of local VC infrastructure tax collectors, political cadre, intelligence agents, dies or deserts during Tet. Colonel Bui Tin of the People's Army of Vietnam states in his post-war memoir that the offensive achieved neither a general uprising nor the destruction of ARVN. It consumed our best cadre. The words appear in a memoir published decades later, but the lesson registers in real time at Central Office for South Vietnam headquarters. By mid-February, communist radio nets go silent in provinces where they once operated nightly. MACV prisoner interrogations reveal that surviving VC cadre await PAVN reinforcements because local force units no longer exist at battalion strength. The firecracker to gunshot snap that opens, Tet announces not the arrival of revolution, but the beginning of its dismantling. Saigon's streets become a kill zone for fighters trained to avoid exactly that. The embassy wall becomes a metaphor. The Viet Cong breach the perimeter but cannot survive the interior. Within 3 days, Allied forces kill or capture more than 5,000 attackers in the capital region alone. The general uprising never materializes. Civilians shelter, flee, or report VC positions to ARVN patrols. Political officers who expected cheering crowds instead face locked doors and empty streets. When the television crews depart, the body counts remain. 1,200 VC dead in Saigon, thousands more across the country, and a provincial infrastructure that will take years to rebuild. American audiences see chaos and conclude defeat. ARVN and MACV see casualty ratios and prepare counter-offensives. The same 6 hours produce 2 entirely different wars. One war dominates headlines and changes presidencies. The other war kills cadre and shifts the revolution's calculus. Not a propaganda victory that conceals a military defeat, but a military catastrophe that wears a propaganda mask. At dawn on the 31st of January, 1968, PAVN and VC forces storm Hue, the ancient imperial capital on the Perfume River inTua Tien Province, and raise the National Liberation Front flag over the citadel's southern wall. Hue is Vietnam's cultural heart. Pagodas, the imperial palace, Quoc Hoc High School, where Ho Chi Minh once studied. The attackers, elements of the PAVN 4th and 6th Regiments, reinforced by VC main force battalions, seize the citadel, the provincial headquarters, and most of the cities south of the river. The plan calls for a 3-day occupation. The battle lasts 26 days. MACV and ARVN initially dismiss Hue as a feint, shifting attention to Saigon and Gia Nang, 100 kilometers south. That miscalculation costs time, but it does not cost the city. On the 31st of January, Major General Ngo Quang Truong, commanding the 1st ARVN Division, begins organizing relief columns from positions north of Hue. By the 1st of February, ARVN airborne battalions and United States Marine companies push into the city from the south. The fight becomes room to room, block by block, building by building, the only kind of warfare where the Viet Cong's advantages evaporate. Urban combat demands exposure, concentration, and resupply, all fatal to guerrilla doctrine. ARVN forces retake the South Bank within a week. The citadel holds for 3 more. United States Marines and ARVN infantry assault the 3-meter-thick walls, cleared by artillery and airstrikes that reduce entire blocks to rubble. Major General Ngo Quang Truong of the 1st ARVN Division states in February 1968 that every meter costs blood, but we do not stop. The enemy chose to stand, and we make him pay for it. The statement captures the arithmetic of Hue. The Viet Cong and PAVN hold the citadel only by remaining inside it, and remaining inside it means dying inside it. On the 25th of February, 1968, ARVN troops tear down the NLF flag and raise the South Vietnamese banner over the Imperial Palace. The casualty ledger is staggering. Approximately 5,000 PAVN and VC killed, 89 captured, 384 ARVN and 216 United States troops dead. thousands of civilians caught in the crossfire or executed in political purges. The battle is the longest, bloodiest urban fight of the war. It is also the fight that destroys the Viet Cong's capacity to hold terrain. Intelligence reports from the 1st ARVN Division note that captured documents reveal PAVN officers now command battalions once led by Southern cadre. The transition from insurgency to conventional warfare, underway since 1965, accelerates into overdrive. VC main force units that entered Hue at battalion strength exit as scattered platoons, or do not exit at all. Province-level cadre who coordinated the attack are killed, captured, or driven underground so deep they lose contact with surviving networks. The citadel becomes a monument to a tactical success that produces a strategic collapse. Holding Hue for 26 days dominates international headlines and feeds the narrative of a war gone wrong. Losing 5,000 fighters to hold it, then losing it anyway, annihilates the organizational structure that made the offensive possible. By March 1968, MACV intelligence summaries report that VC-initiated attacks in Thu Thien and neighboring Quang Tri province dropped by more than 40%. The silence is not ceasefire, it is absence. Hue reveals the hidden cost of urban warfare for a force built around dispersion. Once you concentrate, you become targetable. Once you become targetable, Allied firepower erases you. ARVN and United States forces fight at a 13-to-1 casualty ratio inside Hue's, a number that telegraphs the mismatch. The Viet Cong are not defeated because they lack courage. They are defeated because they lack the doctrine, equipment, and staying power to hold fixed positions against combined arms counterattacks. The doctrine that wins in the jungle, hit, fade, reappear, fails in a city where every street is a fatal funnel. PAVN units learn the lesson and shift strategy. The Viet Cong pay for the education with cadre they cannot replace. General Von Nguyen Giap of the People's Army of Vietnam states in post-war reflection that we did not achieve all objectives at Hue, and the cost was higher than anticipated. The understatement conceals a reckoning. The citadel holds for 26 days, but the southern insurgency loses a generation of leadership. American news crews broadcast the rubble and interpret it as Allied failure. MACV reads the body, counts and prepares to exploit the opening. Both narratives are true, but only one determines what happens next on the battlefield. Perception shapes policy in Washington. Attrition shapes reality in Thu Thien. The flag that flies over Hue for 26 days becomes the most expensive banner in the war, not because it signals victory, but because it costs the cadre who raised it. While American cameras focus on the citadel's broken walls, the Viet Cong's provincial networks collapse in silence. On the 1st of February 1968, Viet Cong forces strike the Mekong Delta with the same fury they unleash on Saigon and Hue, hitting district capitals, province headquarters, and strategic hamlets across 16 provinces. The Delta is the revolution's traditional stronghold. Canals, paddy fields, dense population, and VC infrastructure woven into village life for a decade. If a general uprising will ignite anywhere, it will ignite here. Mai Tho, capital of Jin Tuong Province, falls under assault at 0300 ICT on the 31st of January, when 2 VC battalions storm the province headquarters and ARVN compound. Ben Tre, capital of Kien Hoa Province 30 kilometers southwest, faces similar attacks. VC sappers seize government buildings, the radio station, and key intersections. The pattern repeats in Can Tho, Vinh Long, and a dozen smaller towns. Simultaneous attacks designed to overwhelm defenders and spark popular revolt. For 48 hours, the plan works. Communist flags fly over district offices. ARVN forces retreat to fortified compounds. Roads close. Panic spreads. Then the clock starts running against the attackers. ARVN Regional Force and Popular Force militias, dismissed by American advisors as second-tier troops, hold key positions and buy time for reinforcements. By the 2nd of February, ARVN airborne battalions airlift into My Tho and begin methodical clearance, street by street, house by house. United States riverine forces, Navy patrol boats, Army infantry, helicopter gunships cut VC supply lines along the canals and interdict reinforcements trying to reach the cities. In Ben Tre, the fighting is so intense that United States and ARVN commanders authorize airstrikes and artillery on the town center, reducing entire blocks to rubble. An unnamed United States Army major tells a reporter the line that defines the paradox. It became necessary to destroy the town to save it. The quote becomes infamous, yet the tactical logic is brutal and effective. The Viet Cong cannot hold what no longer exists. By the 3rd of February, My Tho and Ben Tre are back under government control. Casualty counts tell the story. In Jin Tuong province alone, over 800 VC killed, 200 captured. ARVN losses number fewer than 100. Across the Delta, the pattern holds. Initial shock, brief VC occupation, rapid ARVN and United States counterattack, and lopsided attrition. What cameras do not capture is the collapse of local infrastructure. The Viet Cong depend on village-level cadre, tax collectors, political officers, informants, supply coordinators to sustain operations. These cadre operate invisibly, blending into communities, taxing by night, vanishing by day. Urban assault forces them into the open, where ARVN intelligence networks and United States firepower erase them. In Long An province, bordering Saigon, the VC Provincial Committee loses 9 of 13 district officers during Tet. Surviving members report that recruitment stops entirely for months. In Kien Hoa, the party chapter suffers 50% cadre losses, and tax revenue, the insurgency's lifeblood, plummets. MACV intelligence summaries in March 1968 note a consistent pattern. Provinces that saw heavy Tet fighting report 30 to 50% reductions in local force strength and near total loss of village-level political infrastructure. The revolution does not lose battles. It loses the sinew that holds the insurgency together. Communist radio nets go silent in districts where they once broadcast nightly. Prisoner interrogations reveal that local VC units await PAVN reinforcements because their own battalions no longer exist at operational strength. By April 1968, Central Office for South Vietnam begins shifting strategy, pulling surviving Southern cadre out of the Delta and replacing them with PAVN regulars. The shift marks a turning point. The Southern insurgency, built on local roots, cedes control to Hanoi's conventional forces. The general uprising never happens. South Vietnamese civilians do not rise. They shelter, flee, or in many cases guide ARVN troops to VC positions. In Ben Tre, residents later report seeing VC cadre they recognized from years of coercion and taxation dying in the streets. The revolution's anonymity, its greatest asset, dies with its cadre. American news crews focus on destruction, the rubble, the refugees, the ambiguity of destroying the town to save it. ARVN and MACV focus on numbers, kill ratios exceeding 10 to 1, infrastructure collapse, and the disappearance of local force units from contact reports. Both narratives are real, but only one is measurable in the ledgers that determine who controls the Delta 6 months later. By late 1968, VC-initiated attacks in the Mekong Delta dropped by more than 60% from pre-Tet levels. The decline is not truce, it is incapacity. The Viet Cong trade a generation of cadre for 2 days of headline-grabbing attacks and a general uprising that never materializes. The Delta does not turn red. It bleeds out. Not a draw that shifts to stalemate, but an attrition spiral that the insurgency cannot afford and the revolution cannot survive. On the 15th of March 1968, 6 weeks after the Tet attacks begin, MACV intelligence analysts at Tan Son Nhut compile casualty reports, prisoner interrogations, and signals intercepts into a classified summary that tells a story no newspaper will print. The numbers are stark. Approximately 58,000 Viet Cong and PAVN troops killed between the 30th of January and the 15th of March. Another 6,000 captured, entire provincial battalions reduced to company strength or erased entirely. Allied losses, ARVN, United States and South Korean, total roughly 4,000 killed and 16,000 wounded, a 10-to-1 casualty ratio that exceeds every major engagement since 1965. The disparity is not propaganda. It reflects the operational reality of urban combat, where the Viet Cong's guerrilla doctrine collapses against combined arms firepower. More telling than the body count is what the intelligence summaries call infrastructure losses. In Long An Province, the VC Provincial Committee reports that 9 of 13 district-level political officers are dead or missing. Village-level recruitment has ceased. Tax collection has stopped. In Kien Hoa, 50% of local cadre are gone, and the remaining officers request PAVN reinforcements because their own units no longer function. In Thua Thien, site of the Hu bloodbath, the party chapter loses contact with half its village networks. Across Third Corps, the 11 provinces surrounding Saigon, MACV estimates that 30 to 50% of VC district and village cadre have been killed, captured, or driven so far underground they cannot operate. The revolution does not lose the Tet Offensive in a single battle. It loses the infrastructure that made the revolution possible. Intelligence logs track a second, quieter shift. PAVN units begin appearing in provinces traditionally controlled by southern-born Viet Cong. By April 1968, MACV identifies elements of the PAVN 7th Division operating in the Mekong Delta, 200 kilometers south of the demilitarized zone. The 7th Division's presence signals that Central Office for South Vietnam can no longer rely on local forces to sustain operations. Colonel Bui Tin of the People's Army of Vietnam states in his post-war memoir that after Tet, we had to replace the southern cadre with northern troops. The local infrastructure had been decimated. The admission appears decades later, but United States and ARVN intelligence officers notice the shift in real time. Captured documents reveal Central Office for South Vietnam directives ordering PAVN divisions to backfill VC units, a reversal of the strategy that guided the war from 1960 to 1968. The Southern insurgency, built on local roots and popular support, cedes control to Hanoi's conventional army. By mid-1968, the war changes character. Fewer village-level attacks, more battalion-sized PAVN assaults, and a strategic pivot away from People's War toward conventional operations. The shift is neither clean nor immediate, but the trajectory is clear in every MACV intelligence summary from March onward. VC-initiated attacks dropped by 40% in Second Corps, 50% in Third Corps, and 60% in the Mekong Delta by the end of 1968. The decline is not negotiated ceasefire. It is organizational collapse. The Viet Cong lose the capacity to initiate operations at the tempo they sustained before Tet. American news coverage focuses on the shock, embassy walls breached, cities burning, Walter Cronkite's grim verdict, and misses the attrition that follows. Walter Cronkite of CBS News states in his evening news editorial on the 27th of February, 1968, that it is increasingly clear to this reporter that the only rational way out will be to negotiate. The editorial galvanizes American opinion and shapes presidential politics. It also airs 2 weeks after the Viet Cong have lost 30,000 troops and counting. The gap between perception and reality grows so wide that historians will argue over which narrative defines 1968. In Saigon, MACV planners see opportunity. The enemy is exposed, attrited, and scrambling to rebuild. In Washington, policymakers see disaster. The enemy struck everywhere, proving the war is unwinnable. Both sides look at the same casualty reports and draw opposite conclusions. The difference is what they measure. MACV measures who dies and who replaces them. Washington measures headlines and public opinion. One metric tracks tactical reality. The other tracks political viability. The Viet Cong cannot afford to lose 58,000 fighters and 50% of their cadre. They do it anyway. The United States cannot afford to lose public confidence. It does. The war's outcome hinges on which collapse matters more, military infrastructure or political will. By March 1968, the military answer is clear. The revolution is bleeding out. The political answer will take 7 more years and 20,000 more American dead to resolve. Tet becomes a paradox, a military catastrophe for the Viet Cong that produces a political catastrophe for the United States. Not perception over reality, but perception as a reality that overrides battlefield math. By the 1st of March 1968, every major city in South Vietnam has returned to Allied control. MACV analysts tally 58,000 enemy dead, thousands captured, and VC provincial infrastructure collapsing faster than PAVN reinforcements can replace it. The firecracker to gunshot snap that opened Tet has faded, but the silence that follows is louder. Radio nets go dark in provinces where they once hummed nightly. The revolution bleeds out in the streets it tried to claim. The question becomes whether anyone in Washington notices. On the 31st of March, 1968, exactly 2 months after the Tet Offensive begins, President Lyndon Johnson addresses the nation from the Oval Office and announces he will not seek re-election. The speech stuns the country and confirms what millions already believe. The war is lost, stalemate is permanent, and negotiation is the only exit. Johnson does not mention the 58,000 Viet Cong dead or the collapse of VC infrastructure across South Vietnam. He does not cite MACV intelligence summaries showing a 60% drop in enemy-initiated attacks, or the flood of PAVN regulars moving south to replace Southern cadre who no longer exist. He cites public opinion, domestic unrest, and the televised images that define Tet. Sappers inside embassy walls, cities burning, refugees fleeing. The Tet Offensive achieves what no battlefield victory could. It breaks American political will. Yet on the ground, the offensive breaks the Viet Cong. The paradox defines the war's final 7 years and shapes every debate about Vietnam that follows. By mid-1968, captured documents and prisoner interrogations confirm what MACV suspected in February. The Southern insurgency is organizationally shattered. In Long An province, one of the Viet Cong's most secure bases, the Provincial Committee files a report to Central Office for South Vietnam in May 1968, stating that 9 of 13 district officers are dead, village-level recruitment has ceased, and tax collection, the lifeblood of insurgency, has dropped to near zero. The committee requests northern reinforcements and authorization to suspend operations until infrastructure can be rebuilt. The same pattern repeats across 3rd Corps, the Mekong Delta, and coastal provinces from Quang Tri to Ca Mau. Party chapters that once directed company-sized attacks now struggle to muster platoons. PAVN divisions move into the Delta, a region they have never had to occupy in strength because local forces can no longer hold it. Peter Braystrup, a journalist writing in 1977, states in his retrospective analysis that the media framed Tet as an American defeat, when in fact it was a catastrophic loss for the Viet Cong. Braystrup's post-mortem, published nearly a decade later, documents how television coverage emphasized shock and ignored attrition, how reporters focused on tactical setbacks and missed strategic collapse. The analysis is forensic and devastating. Journalists operating under deadline pressure and lacking access to classified intelligence reported what they saw: chaos and inferred defeat. The inference was wrong, but it shaped policy. By August 1968, MACV estimates that VC strength has dropped from 84,000 effective fighters in January to fewer than 50,000, and half of those are PAVN replacements, not Southern cadre. The shift from insurgency to conventional war, underway since 1965, completes during Tet. What was once a Southern-led revolution becomes a Northern-directed military campaign, relying on PAVN divisions, surface-to-air missiles, and armor, the tools of conventional warfare, not people's war. The revolution dies not in a single explosion, but in 1,000 quiet collapses. A tax collector who stops visiting villages, a political officer who never returns, a radio net that goes silent and stays silent. These losses do not photograph well, so they vanish from history. What remains is the image of sappers breaching embassy walls, a visual metaphor for invasion. The metaphor is powerful and misleading. The sappers breach the walls and die. The walls remain. The embassy reopens. The image suggests vulnerability. The casualty count suggests annihilation. American audiences see the former. ARVN and MACV fight the latter. The gap between perception and reality becomes unbridgeable. In November 1968, Richard Nixon wins the presidency on a platform of peace with honor, inheriting a war that is militarily viable and politically doomed. Nixon and National Security Advisor Henry Kissinger pursue Vietnamization, transferring combat responsibilities to ARVN while withdrawing United States troops. Not because the battlefield demands it, but because domestic politics do. The irony is acute. At the moment, the Viet Cong are least capable of sustained operations. The United States begins disengaging. ARVN forces, blooded at Hue and in the Delta, prove increasingly effective at holding territory and conducting mobile operations. United States advisors note that ARVN performance during Tet often matched or exceeded American units in urban combat, a fact obscured by the media focus on United States casualties. Yet Vietnamization proceeds on a timetable shaped by public opinion, not battlefield conditions. By 1969, VC-initiated attacks have dropped by 60% from pre-Tet levels. By 1970, the Viet Cong as an independent military force effectively ceased to exist. PAVN divisions carry the war, supported by armor, artillery, and surface-to-air missiles supplied by the Soviet Union and China. The conflict Nixon inherits looks less like the guerrilla war of 1965 and more like the conventional war MACV always wanted to fight. But the American public has already reached its verdict. The war is unwinnable, the enemy is unbreakable, and withdrawal is the only rational option. Tet cements that verdict even as it annihilates the enemy who triggered it. The firecracker to gunshot snap that jolted Saigon awake on the 31st of January 1968 echoes across 7 years of policy debates, peace negotiations, and slow-motion disengagement. Hanoi learns the lesson that Washington misses. Military defeats can produce political victories if the narrative is strong enough. The Communist Party does not win Tet on the battlefield. It wins Tet in the pages of the New York Times and on the evening news. The cost is catastrophic. 58,000 dead, infrastructure shattered, the Southern insurgency hollowed out. The payoff is strategic. American withdrawal accelerates, negotiations begin, and PAVN divisions gain time to regroup. By 1972, when PAVN launches the Easter Offensive with armor and artillery in a conventional assault across the demilitarized zone, the war has become the conventional conflict MACV claimed it was in 1968. The difference is that American ground combat troops are gone, and ARVN must hold alone. Tet does not end the war, but it ends the illusion that the war can be won through attrition and firepower, without political support at home. The Viet Cong pay for that lesson with their existence. The United States pays for it with 7 more years and 20,000 more dead. In April 1975, when PAVN tanks roll into Saigon and the war finally ends, the soldiers driving those tanks are Northerners, not Southern insurgents. The revolution that Tet was supposed to ignite died in February 1968 in the streets of Saigon, Hue, and the Delta. What survived was the North's conventional army and its will to outlast American political endurance. Tet proves that perception can decide wars as surely as firepower, that shock can outlast attrition, and that who controls the narrative controls the outcome. The Viet Cong attack 36 provincial capitals and lose 58,000 troops. They lose the infrastructure that made the insurgency viable. They lose the capacity to operate independently of PAVN support. They lose the war they have been fighting since 1960. But they win the headline, "Enemy strikes everywhere, America falters." The headline rewrites the war. History records both truths, the tactical disaster and the strategic victory, the body count and the broadcast, the firepower and the perception. What history struggles to convey is that both can be true simultaneously, and that the one which matters depends on who you ask. Ask MACV in March 1968, and they show you casualty ratios, infrastructure collapse, and battlefield opportunity. Ask Walter Cronkite, and he shows you stalemate, futility, and the need for negotiation. Ask the Longan Provincial Committee, and they show you 9 dead district officers and a recruitment freeze. Ask President Johnson, and he shows you protest signs, poll numbers, and an election he cannot win. Each answer is correct within its frame of reference. The tragedy is that only one frame, the perception of failure, shapes the policy that follows. Tet becomes the hinge event of the Vietnam War, not because it changes the balance of forces, but because it changes the willingness to continue fighting. The Viet Cong bleed out. America checks out. Shock wins the headlines. Attrition kills the revolution. The revolution dies in the streets it tried to claim, but the war continues for 7 more years because perception, once hardened, becomes reality. The firecracker to gunshot snap that opened Tet announces not a turning point, but a breaking point. Not for the Viet Cong's capacity to fight, but for America's will to stay. And in war, will is the only metric that cannot be attrited. By December 1968, MACV intelligence summaries confirm what field commanders reported in March. The Viet Cong as an independent military force no longer exists at pre-Tet strength. Provincial committees file reports requesting PAVN reinforcements. Radio nets remain silent for weeks. Tax collection drops across the Delta, the highlands and coastal lowlands. The insurgency that terrorized South Vietnam for 8 years has been gutted, not by strategic Hamlet programs or search and destroy sweeps, but by its own decision to mass in cities and fight on ground where Allied firepower dominates. The revolution's cadre, village chiefs, tax collectors, political officers, intelligence agents, die in daylight, in streets, in firefights they were never trained to survive. What took a decade to build collapses in 6 weeks. PAVN divisions move south to replace them, transforming the war from insurgency to conventional mechanized combat. By 1969, the Viet Cong contribute fewer than half the combat formations operating in South Vietnam. By 1972, they are a footnote. The Easter Offensive of 1972 is a PAVN operation fought with tanks, artillery, and surface-to-air missiles. Tools of a conventional army, not a people's war. Yet the political damage from Tet persists. American withdrawal accelerates under Nixon. Peace negotiations drag on in Paris. Domestic protest intensifies. ARVN forces, often effective and occasionally exceptional, inherit a war the United States no longer believes it can win. The final collapse in 1975 comes not from Viet Cong guerrillas, but from PAVN divisions rolling south in a conventional blitzkrieg, capturing Saigon in weeks. The soldiers who take the presidential palace are northerners. The insurgents who began the war in 1960 are long dead, captured, or broken. Tet's legacy is dual. It kills the southern insurgency and ends American commitment. The revolution dies in the streets. The war dies in the living rooms. Both casualties are real. Only one is photographed. History remembers Tet as the moment America lost the war. The better truth is that Tet is the moment the Viet Cong lose the capacity to win it, and the moment America loses the will to continue. Shock and attrition run parallel for 7 years, each decisive in its own domain. The firecracker to gunshot snap that announced Tet fades, but its echo shapes the war's endgame. The Viet Cong never recover. America never forgets. In the gap between those two facts, the war's final act unfolds. Perception becomes policy. Attrition becomes irrelevant. The lesson is brutal and enduring. You can win every battle and lose the war if the public stops believing victory is possible. Tet proves that wars are won in 2 domains: the battlefield, where body counts and infrastructure collapse matter, and the television screen, where perception overrides every tactical reality. The Viet Cong lose 58,000 fighters, half their cadre, and the capacity to sustain independent operations, a catastrophic military defeat. Yet shock wins the headlines, attrition dies in silence, and policy follows perception, not math. The revolution dies in the streets it tried to claim. Shock won headlines, attrition killed the revolution.